right, we are working on Unit 4, Lesson 3, which is simplifying fractions. So again, this is Unit 4, Lesson 3, simplifying fractions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of vocabulary for you. So let me write up here, Unit 4, Lesson 3, simplifying fractions. So there are some things that you will probably remember from our previous lessons, and that is a fraction is a part of a whole. Hopefully you remember the word numerator, which tells how many pieces we have, and it's also the top number of a fraction. It's the top number. Hopefully you remember down, down, down denominator. The denominator is the bottom number of a fraction, and it tells how many pieces there are in the whole. And again, this is your bottom number of your fraction. All right, and some new vocabulary that you may want to include would be factors. And I know we've talked about multiples. Multiples are the numbers you get when you count by the numerator or the denominator, but factors are kind of the opposite. You kind of have to do some division, but it's numbers that are multiplied together to equal a product. Numbers multiplied together to equal a product. And then we also have the greatest common factor. So I know we've talked about the least common denominator. Now we're talking about the greatest common factor. Remember that something that the numbers would have in common would be something that's the same. So common just means the same. Greatest means the largest. So it's the largest factor that two or more numbers have in common. The largest factor that two or more numbers have in common. So when we look at simplifying fractions, we're going to be trying to find the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator. So we're looking at the numerator and the denominator, and to simplify, we have to divide both numbers by the greatest common factor. Now, we have to know how to find the greatest common factor to be able to do that. We have to know how to find the greatest common factor to be able to do that. So let's do some examples together. For instance, let's say we wanted to simplify 6 ninths. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at each number separately. I know that in the number 6, when I multiply 1 times 6, that equals 6. And I know 2 times 3 equals 6. And I know that if I go any further than that, it's going to be 3 times 2, which would be a repeat, and 6 times 1, which would be a repeat. So I don't need to continue on. I don't need to repeat the inverse number sentences. So now we're going to go to 9. Okay, I know that 1 times 9 is 9. Can't divide it by 2 because it's not an even number. So I'm going to go on to 3, and I know that 3 times 3 equals 9. And again, I can't do 4, can't do 5, can't do 6, can't do 7, can't do 8, but it would take me back to 9. So when I list the factors of 6, the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. The factors of 9 are 1, 3, and 9. Notice that I list them from least to greatest. So factors are listed least to greatest. When I look at what when I look at what 6 and 9 have in common, I see that they have 1, and I see that they have 3. 3 is the greatest number that they have in common. Therefore, 3 is the greatest common factor. Now notice I'm not finished yet. I've found the greatest common factor. Now I have to simplify my fraction. The way that I'm going to simplify my fraction is to divide the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factor. So I'm going to take 6 and 9, and I'm going to divide both of them by 3 over 3. Remember that we can divide by 1 and we get an equivalent fraction, or we can multiply by 1 and get an equivalent fraction. And 3/3 is the same thing as 1 whole. So when we do 6 divided by 3, 6 divided by 3 equals 2. And 3 divided by 3 9 divided by 3 equals 3. So 2/3 is the simplified version of 6/9. 2/3 is the simplified version of 6/9. Now, we can have a whole lot of other factors. So it's important that when we make sure and go through each of our numbers that we list every single factor. There's a couple ways that you can make sure that you do this. First of all, you can check off things as you go. So let's say that we decide we're going to go with 16/24, and we need to simplify 16/24. Remember that we're going to use the numerator and the denominator, and we're going to list the factors of each. So I know when I go and think about what times what equals what, I can do 1 times 16. I can do 2 times 8. 3 does not go into 16. 4 does go into 16. It's 4 times 4. And at this point, anything I do is going to repeat. I can go 5, nope, 6, no, 7, no, 8, yes, 8 times 2. So it would be a repeat factor. So I don't have to go that far. Now let's try 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. I can't do 5. Once I get to 6, it starts repeating. So now I want to make sure that when I list the factors of 16, I list every factor of 16 and I don't leave anything out. And I want to go from least to greatest. So when I do that, I'm going to look and say, okay, there's 1. 1 is a factor. I'm going to cross off 1 so that I know I've dealt with it. Here's 2. 2 is a factor. I'm going to cross it off and write it down. I don't have 3 on there, but I do have 4. So I'm going to put comma 4, 8, and 16. Now, I should have dealt with every single factor on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Well, the reason it's not 6 is because I have a duplicate factor here. So really, I should have 5 factors. And so I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I don't have to list 4 twice. I mean, I can, but I don't have to. So that's for 16. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to list the factors from least to greatest. And I'm going to cross them off as I go so I know I've dealt with them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. And you may notice as I went up, my factors increased. And then when I changed directions, I was able to go down for those factors to show the greatest factor was 24. Now, I see that 16 and 24 have 1, 2, 4, and 8 in common. The highest number out of 1, 2, 4, and 8 is going to be 8. 8 is my greatest common factor. That means I'm going to divide 16 over 24 by 8 over 8. That's 16 divided by 8 and 24 divided by 8. 16 divided by 8 is 2. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So 2/3 is the simplified fraction. Simplified fraction. So here's a cool fun fact for you, just so you know. Anytime you have a fraction and the numerator and the denominator are consecutive numbers, that means anytime you have a fraction and the numbers are side by side when you're counting. So let's say you have 7/8. These are consecutive numbers. 7 and 8 are consecutive numbers. They're side by side. Anytime you have consecutive numbers, your fraction is already simplified. So anytime you have consecutive numbers, in your numerator and denominator, your fraction is already simplified. All right, as always, if you have any questions or need any help, please don't hesitate to come by and see me. Thank you.